The beginning of the record 1834, they were not cruel men by temperament, only certain of their own righteousness. Fragment from the Calder family journal 1834. Welcome back. Before we continue, like, subscribe, share. The Calder estate stood 12 miles east of Woodville, Mississippi, where the soil was red and rich, and the air in summer carried the scent of magnolia and iron. In 1834, the property was already 50 years old. Its main house built of cypress and brick, with galleries overlooking a stretch of cotton fields that shimmered white beneath the August sun. Nathaniel Calder, age 42, had inherited both the land and the philosophy of his father, that order, discipline, and providence justified every human arrangement beneath God's sky. His wife, Miriam, was regarded by local churchwomen as pious and intelligent, though fragile in temperament. They had 3 surviving children, Robert, Elias, and Catherine, and a reputation for efficient management. The Calders' wealth rested upon 2 enslaved people. Local merchants described Nathaniel as upright and honorable. His ledgers, still preserved in county archives, display the tidy hand of a man who prized record, keeping above sentiment. Yet between the columns of acreage, yield, and livestock appear occasional notations, cryptic, clinical, and chilling. Phrases like pairing successful, issue expected in March, or offspring deemed viable, retained for breeding. The first entry bearing such language is dated October 1834. That autumn, according to later depositions, Miriam began to withdraw from her social circle. Visitors remarked on her silence and her peculiar way of avoiding the quarters behind the gin house. Nathaniel, meanwhile, became increasingly absorbed in experiments of improvement, a phrase that appears repeatedly in correspondence to his brother-in-law, Dr. Alaric Moore, a physician from Natchez known for his interest in comparative anatomy. The household staff would later recall evenings when the men lingered in the study long after supper, voices low but animated, the firelight flickering through the glass of brandy in Nathaniel's hand. Miriam, seated in her sewing chair, would stare into the embers without moving, her needle paused mid-stitch. In December, the first ledger marked trial complete. A single line unsigned. The handwriting is slightly different, shakier, almost hesitant. Some historians suggest it was written by Miriam herself, others that it belonged to one of the overseers, compelled to transcribe what he witnessed. From that winter forward, the Calders' records take on an unmistakable pattern. Births increase, infant mortality decreases, cotton yields remain stable, yet Nathaniel's letters boast of new efficiencies and self-perpetuating labor. There is no mention of mercy or of names, only numbers. By 1836, neighboring planters began seeking Nathaniel's advice. His methods, they said, were progressive. His children grew up within this quiet system of control, learning arithmetic from the same ledgers that recorded human lives. No one questioned the Calders. No one intervened. The horror was patient. It began not with screams, but with ink. The silent years 1837-1841 from the Calder estate records 1834-1865. We learned to look away, and in doing so, became part of the act. Letter from Reverend Amos Talcott to his brother, 1841. By 1837, the Calder estate was spoken of with admiration throughout Wilkinson County. Nathaniel's methods, whatever they truly were, had doubled his labor force without purchase or import. Local planters, facing the rising cost of slaves and the tightening restrictions on interstate trade, called it Calder efficiency. In truth, it was something far darker. Few written records survive from those years, but what remains is enough to chill the blood. Between accounts of cotton yields and livestock appear lists of first names, Sarah, Lydia, Ruth, followed by notations such as productive or sterile. The same hand that signed crop invoices assigned these verdicts without pause. In 1838, Dr. Alaric Moore began spending whole weeks at the estate. His letters to colleagues at the University of Louisiana describe studies of hereditary disposition and temperament conducted under conditions he called controlled and most promising. He never specified the subjects. Only one letter, discovered decades later among his medical papers, makes the meaning unmistakable. The overseer reports that selective pairing among the field women produces stronger offspring. The experiment continues with the full consent of Mr. Calder. That same year, Miriam ceased attending church altogether. The Reverend noted her absence from communion and received a polite reply written in another's hand, Mrs. Calder unwell, confined to her rooms. Servants whispered that her illness was not of the body but of the mind. At night, they said, she could be heard reciting psalms through her locked door until dawn. Catherine Calder, barely 12, wrote in a surviving notebook of strange cries in the lower rooms. Her words, in a child's uncertain hand, were dismissed for years as imagination, until later records confirmed that several women had been confined in the cellar of the carriage house during late pregnancy. The cellar remains bricked over to this day. In 1840, Nathaniel was invited to speak before the County Agricultural Society in Natchez. His topic, inheritance, labor, and the future of Southern prosperity. The paper has not survived, but the minutes record that it was well received, though advanced in tone. Witnesses later recalled that he spoke not of people, but of lineages and breeding efficiency, comparing his laborers to livestock in all but name. Applause followed. When he returned to the estate, he brought with him new instruments, brass calipers, scales, and a ledger bound in black leather. The notations grew colder after that. No longer were there individual names, only initials, and beside them, numbers. By 1841, the Calder system was complete. A plantation turned laboratory, a household turned silent. Miriam withdrew entirely from view. Elias and Robert began their studies under their uncle's guidance. Catherine's diary ended abruptly that winter with the words, "Father says we are building something that will outlast sin itself." No one outside the estate understood what he meant. Those inside no longer dared to ask. The Ledger of Inheritance 1842-1847 from the Calder estate records 1834-1865. The black leather ledger discovered in the west wing of the Calder house remains among the most disturbing artifacts of antebellum record-keeping. Dated between 1842 and 1847, it details every birth, death, and experiment, conducted on the estate under Nathaniel Calder's supervision. Its columns are coldly methodical. Weights, cranial measurements, temperament notes, and observations written in a practiced, elegant hand. By then, Dr. Moore's visits had grown infrequent. He wrote less of medicine and more of faith. One letter, preserved in the archives of St. Stephen's Seminary, pleads, Nathaniel's inquiry has gone beyond what the Lord permits. He speaks now of perfectibility, of cleansing the human form of error itself. I fear for his soul and for the children. The ledger entries that follow seem to confirm those fears. Under each year's heading, there are repeated references to cross lines and internal pairings. By 1843, entire generations of enslaved families had been reorganized, not by kinship but by trait. Words such as melancholic strain or docile aspect replaced surnames. To Nathaniel, humanity was an equation awaiting correction. Miriam Calder's condition worsened. Household accounts list large purchases of laudanum and camphor oil. The servants reported she no longer recognized her own children, mistaking Elias for Nathaniel's brother, or sometimes for someone else entirely. When she tried to destroy one of her husband's ledgers, he ordered her confined to her room for rest and safety. She was never seen in daylight again. Meanwhile, Elias, then 16, assisted his father in measurements and observations. His handwriting appears beside his father's in the ledger, neater and more precise, as though eager to impress. Robert, the younger son, left the estate for medical training in New Orleans, but returned each summer to help with field studies. Catherine's name does not reappear after 1844. A single note in the margin reads only, "C. Withdrawn temperament unstable. That same year, Dr." Moore resigned his academic post and vanished from correspondence. A rumor spread that he had taken his own life, though no record confirms it. His final letter to the university described unholy trials upon the innocent, and requested that all prior reports be sealed. The request was granted without explanation. By 1846, local midwives began refusing to serve the Calder property, claiming that births there did not proceed as God intended. Infants were either stillborn or lived only days. Nathaniel blamed deficient stock, but the surviving notes reveal an undercurrent of panic references to unforeseen abnormalities and features inconsistent with parental type. The last page of the ledger bears only a single sentence, written in ink darker than the rest, as though pressed down by trembling hands. The pattern will not hold. After that, the records stop. No entries for 1847. No mention of Miriam's fate. The next surviving document is a funeral receipt from Natchez for a coffin for one adult female. Her name was never written. The harvest of 1848 from the Calder estate records 1834-1865. In the spring of 1848, the Calder estate seemed to flourish once again. Cotton yields were at a record high, the fields full and orderly. To the outside world, it was proof of Nathaniel's genius. To those who worked the land, it was a season of dread. A series of letters from the overseer, Josiah Pratt, preserved in the county archive, speak in oblique but unmistakable terms. He wrote of strange dispositions among the women, of fevers that come without sweat, and of children born silent but with their eyes already open. When he attempted to summon a physician from Natchez, Nathaniel refused him, declaring the events predictable expressions of refinement. One entry in Pratt's log stands out. Dated August 17, 1848, it reads, "The north quarter is sealed by order of Mr. Calder. No one to enter, not even to fetch water. Night noises like the crying of infants, though all cabins there stand empty." That same month, Elias began his own record book, found later in a desk beneath layers of soot and mildew. His tone is scholarly, detached, yet almost devotional toward his father's theories. He wrote, "The failures are instructive. Nature resists perfection but yields, for a time, to determination." He described the use of chloroform on subjects unfit for propagation, and recorded the anatomical peculiarities of several corpses with a precision that suggested medical training well beyond his years. How he obtained such knowledge remains uncertain, though his Uncle Robert's periodic visits may explain it. When the Reverend Talcott attempted to visit in October, he found the front gates chained. From the road he saw only shuttered windows and the smoke of burning refuse. He wrote later that he felt a presence that watched from every darkened pane. That winter, the estate ceased all communication. County records note that 4 enslaved women escaped in December 1848 and reached Natchez, where they gave testimonies to local officials. Their words were dismissed as hysterical and never formally transcribed, but fragments survive in an abolitionist newspaper published the following spring. They spoke of rooms beneath the smokehouse and the master's son with the metal mask. In early 1849, a trader delivering seed found the estate abandoned, doors open, fires long cold, livestock wandering. Of the Calder family, only Elias remained, thin, fevered, and nearly incoherent. When questioned, he repeated one phrase over and over: "It took her face. It took Mother's face." He was taken to a sanatorium outside Baton Rouge, where he died 3 months later. The attending physician noted severe self-inflicted lacerations and delusions of duplication. The body was buried in an unmarked grave. No trace of Nathaniel, Robert, or Miriam's remains were ever recovered. The estate was sold at auction the following year, its structures dismantled for lumber, yet locals claimed the ground itself remained barren. No grass, no weeds, nothing but clay that bled red after rain. Even now, farmers avoid the hill where the manor once stood. They say the soil still exhales when the wind turns east. The Anatomist's Papers 1850-1854 from the Calder estate records 1834-1865. When the Calder estate finally passed into new ownership in 1850, the auctioneer noted a peculiar odor of alkali and smoke that clung to every wall. Most furniture had been burned before the sale. What the new owners did not know was that a collection of sealed crates, Blaine pine, unmarked, remained hidden beneath the collapsed floor of the eastern wing. Those crates were not discovered until 1853, when the property changed hands once again. Inside were the so-called Anatomist's Papers, a series of notebooks and sketches later identified by watermark as belonging to Dr. Robert Calder. Each page bore minute diagrams of human musculature and bone, annotated with remarks such as deviation from design and incipient correction. The drawings were meticulous, almost reverent, and many depicted subjects that were unmistakably non-adult in proportion. Among these papers was a folded letter addressed to Nathaniel, dated May 1851, sent from New Orleans. The writing trembles between admiration and disgust. Your vision was not without merit, brother, but the body resists our reach. What is bred in error will only refine that error. We must look inward. The flesh will not yield, but the mind. Perhaps it was signed simply R.C. Scholars later interpreted this as a shift in focus, from physical manipulation to mental discipline, from breeding to behavior. Robert's subsequent experiments are hinted at in parish hospital records, a series of charity cases, involving patients described as mute, obedient, exhibiting suggestibility beyond expectation. The resemblance to earlier Calder terminology, compliant strain, docile aspect, is unmistakable. Meanwhile, stories circulated among the freedmen who worked the property's periphery. They spoke of lights under the ground at night, and of a figure walking the ridgeline in the fog, tall and rigid, carrying what looked like a physician's bag. They said he came to collect what had been left unfinished. In 1854, a storm collapsed part of the estate's north field, exposing the foundations of a brick vault. The new owner ordered it sealed, but not before a farmhand reported seeing shelves with jars, and inside the jars, small things that moved when the wind touched them. His statement was dismissed as superstition, yet the vault was never opened again. Later correspondence from a surveyor mentions distorted echoes when sounding the soil, a hollow resonance inconsistent with solid earth. He noted that the ground seemed to breathe. After that year, all references to the Calders vanish from county records. It was as though their name itself had been struck out. Only the notebooks remained, carefully catalogued, stored, and later purchased by a medical college in Vicksburg, where they stayed until the fire of 1863. The catalogue's final entry describes volume Roman 13, marked by a single sentence scrawled across its inside cover in dried ink: "Mind begets flesh." The rest of the volume was lost to flame. The Mind Begets Flesh 1855-1858 from the Calder Estate Records 1834-1865. In 1855, a series of lectures were delivered before the Louisiana Medical Society by an anonymous speaker identified only as a Southern anatomist. Transcripts recovered decades later reveal striking parallels with Robert Calder's final letter. The lecturer spoke not of disease or anatomy, but of obedience, asserting that the perfected subject is not born, but cultivated through suggestion and deprivation. Several attendees remarked upon the speaker's veiled face, described as masked against contagion or perhaps to conceal deformity. His presentation ended abruptly when he was challenged to produce evidence. He left the hall without a word, abandoning a leather case that contained only a small anatomical sketch labeled Phase 2. That same year, a boarding house in Natchez registered a tenant under the name R. Carton, believed to be Robert Calder under assumed identity. He paid in silver coin, kept to himself, and often departed for days at a time, returning before dawn with his coat smeared in clay. The proprietor's wife later recalled a faint sound like crying from the parcels he carried, though she admitted it might have been imagination. In 1856, a letter reached Reverend Talcott, now an old man, from an unknown sender in Natchez. It contained only a few lines: "Your warnings were correct. The body rejects the perfect form, but the mind may be taught to remember another's shape." He recognized the handwriting as Robert's. The following months brought scattered reports of disturbances near the abandoned Calder property. Pale figures glimpsed at twilight, sounds of digging, lights moving beneath the ground. Farmers found livestock missing or opened, precisely as though by surgical hand. The sheriff's report lists the cause as animal predation, but the undersheriff wrote privately that the wounds seemed more like instruction than consumption. In the autumn of 1857, a traveling photographer, Charles Dearden, documented ruins along the Natchez Trace. Among his surviving glass plates is one mislabeled Old Bridge Foundation. Close inspection reveals a figure standing in the background, too still for motion blur. Its proportions are subtly wrong: arms too long, jaw undefined, and where the eyes should be, the emulsion has bubbled, as though the light itself recoiled. That same year, a new asylum opened near Vicksburg, intended to treat war-related nervous afflictions. Its earliest patient records predate the Civil War, however, and among them appears the name Elias Calder, though death records place him in 1849. The admission notes describe a man of indeterminate age, claiming to have been born twice, once of woman, once of the mind. He was confined under observation for 3 years. The final entry, dated January 1858, reads, "Subject speaks in alternating tones, referring to himself as two persons. Reports dreams of rooms filled with glass jars. Upon questioning the origin, he replies, 'Father taught me to breathe through the walls,' and no further notes follow." The patient disappeared during a storm that spring. The asylum's northern wing flooded. 12 bodies were recovered, but his was not among them. By then, the Calder name had become a rumor, a curse whispered along river towns, a family that tried to make God in their own image and succeeded only in remaking themselves. The collapse of the house 1859-1861 from the Calder estate records 1834-1865. By 1859, the Calder plantation existed more in memory than in matter. The cotton fields had long been overrun by briars, the workers scattered, the overseers unpaid. The great house, once a symbol of ambition and order, stood hollow, its windows black with mildew, its veranda sagging into the wet earth. Only Beatrice Calder and a handful of aging servants remained. Neighbors seldom visited. Those who passed on business or by accident swore that lights flickered underground on moonless nights, as though the house itself breathed from beneath. A preacher from Baton Rouge who came to offer prayer returned the next morning pale and silent, refusing to speak of what he had seen, except to say, "The walls remember." Robert Calder, or what was left of him, wrote nothing after 1858. One final scrap of handwriting charred around the edges was found decades later wedged behind a broken mirror frame in the study. It read, "Perfection must be contained. The soul will not rest if the shell is broken." Beatrice was seen rarely outside. When she did appear, her posture had changed, stiffer, as if mimicking another's stance. Her hair, once dark, had turned white at the temples. The cook swore that she conversed at night in her husband's voice, answering herself from the shadows. By winter, she dismissed the remaining staff, claiming the estate would soon be self-sufficient again. None of them stayed to learn what she meant. In the spring of 1860, a group of surveyors charting the property boundary found fresh earth near the collapsed greenhouse. When they uncovered the soil, they discovered dozens of small glass vessels, each sealed with wax. Inside every jar was something preserved in clear fluid, dyes, tongues, fragments of skin labeled with dates and initials. Many bore the surname Calder. The men fled and reported the find to the county magistrate, but when officials returned a week later, the site was bare. The jars were gone, and the disturbed ground had been smoothed as though by heavy rain or deliberate hand. That summer, the plantation caught fire. No one saw how it began. Flames rose first from the western wing, spreading quickly through the dry timber. Witnesses from the nearest farm said the fire burned without smoke, pale and colorless, as if consuming not wood but light. By dawn, the house was gone. Only the brick foundation and a few charred beams remained. Beatrice Calder was never found. Some claimed she fled north before the war. Others whispered she perished in the blaze. A local tale persisted that a woman-shaped figure wandered the ruins long after, face veiled, speaking in two voices, one pleading, one commanding. When the census takers arrived in 1861, they recorded the Calder property as abandoned. Yet in the margin of the document, in the surveyor's own hand, appeared an unsettling note. The cellar doors were open when we arrived. A sound like breathing came from below. We did not enter. The war years 1861-1865 from the Calder estate records, 1834-1865. When war came in 1861, the Calder name had already become a rumor. The plantation's borders were overgrown, the chimneys moss, struck and half collapsed, the air thick with the smell of burned pine and stagnant water. Yet Union scouts passing through northern Louisiana that autumn reported faint light emanating from the ruins' cellar vents, steady candle, bright long after midnight. The officer commanding their company recorded the sight in his journal. No structures above ground, yet light persists from below. One voice audible, female, repeating the same words as though in prayer or command. None dared to investigate. The men camped 2 miles east and moved on by morning. What remained of the Calder records during those years was pieced together later from fragments, letters unsent, inventory lists salvaged from ash, and an undated diary found in the wreckage of a neighboring home. The handwriting appears to be Beatrice's, though weaker and slanted. They took him from me, they took what was mine, but the line remains. The heart does not die, it merely divides. By 1863, when the Union Army advanced deeper into Louisiana, freedmen and displaced families sought shelter where they could. Some reached the outskirts of the Calder property and refused to enter, claiming that the ground hummed underfoot and that the remaining stones were warm even at night. One boy, aged 12, later told an interviewer from the Freedmen's Bureau that he saw a white woman with no face watching from the edge of the field. Meanwhile, regional newspapers reported sightings of a hermit woman scavenging along the Bayou Teche roads, draped in tattered black lace, her hands burned and scarred. Each account placed her within a day's travel of the old Calder estate. Whether this figure was Beatrice or merely legend attaching itself to ruin, no one could prove. In 1864, Confederate deserters scavenging for supplies entered the remains of the house. According to testimony later given in a Vicksburg court, they found a trapdoor beneath the collapsed parlor floor, its iron lock fused by heat, its hinges still warm to the touch. One man claimed to hear a heartbeat below. They fled without breaking it open. By the war's end in 1865, the land had reverted to swamp and vine. The river shifted its course, swallowing the lower fields, erasing the formal drive that once led to the mansion's doors. Yet those who lived nearby swore that on windless nights the old bell from the Calder chapel still rang, a low, uneven toll, as if struck from underwater. When Union surveyors returned after the surrender, they marked the Calder property as destroyed, uninhabitable. But one officer in his margin notes added, uninhabitable, yes, but not unoccupied. No human remains were ever recovered. No record of Beatrice Calder's death was filed in the parish archives. The official line reads simply, presumed lost, 1861. The Revelation Post, or Reconstruction and Discovery from the Calder Estate Records, 1834-1865, after the war, when the Confederacy's flags were lowered and the South fell silent beneath the weight of its own ghosts, the Calder property became a borderland between history and rumor. Freedmen built small cabins on the edges of the former estate, careful never to cross the old gate line. Even children refused to play near the foundation stones, saying the air was wrong there, too still, too heavy, as if it remembered. In 1867, a northern surveyor named Edwin Coe was hired to redraw property lines for tax reconstruction. His field note, preserved in the Louisiana Historical Register, contained the first known description of what lay beneath the Calder ruin. He wrote, excavation at foundation depth revealed a sublevel of stonework not listed on prior maps. Entry narrow, possibly man-made, odor of decay immediate. Chamber extends downward at least 20 feet. Carved initials are C on threshold lintel. Coe returned to his camp that evening and, according to his assistant, spoke continually to himself until dawn. He left the next morning without collecting payment and never returned to Louisiana. He was committed to an asylum in Massachusetts 2 years later for nervous exhaustion and auditory delusions. Among his possessions was a single scrap of paper marked with a faint diagram, a circle divided by veins resembling a heart. Local Reconstruction officials, finding his notes incomprehensible, ignored them. Yet stories began to circulate among field workers. They said the ground sometimes trembled softly, that the soil exhaled a mist in the mornings, white and strangely sweet smelling. When plowing, they unearthed small bones, brittle and translucent, too fine for animals. Some claimed to hear crying beneath the plow. In 1870, a Methodist minister attempted to bless the ground. His sermon was interrupted when the crucifix at his throat snapped from its chain and fell into the dirt. He left mid-prayer, muttering that the Lord is absent here. The government later sold the land to a timber company, which stripped the upper woods but avoided the central ruin. Workers said their tools broke without reason. Their mules refused to enter the area. The foreman's report noted magnetic interference with their compasses, a term meaningless in rural Louisiana at the time. In 1883, the new owner, James Lockhart, ordered the site cleared for a hunting lodge. During excavation, laborers found what they thought were bricks, until one broke open to reveal something wet and fibrous inside, pulsing faintly before collapsing to dust. Lockhart stopped the project that same day. By the turn of the century, the Calder estate was overgrown once more. Only the cellar entrance remained visible, sealed with iron and overlaid with swamp reeds. A handful of archivists and historians in Baton Rouge exchanged letters about the site's strange magnetism, but no official study was ever made. The legend persisted, spreading quietly, that the Calder experiments had not truly ended, that something beneath the ruin had survived, something shaped not entirely human but bearing the Calder blood, patient and unfinished. The aftermath, modern discovery and lingering presence from the Calder estate records 1834-1865. The Calder estate was officially forgotten by the dawn of the 20th century. County maps erased its boundaries. Its name appeared only in local cautionary tales. Yet the land itself refused silence. Travelers passing the old river road spoke of a low hum at dusk, as if hundreds of bees swarmed beneath the soil. Animals avoided the marshy hollow where the manor had stood, and hunters who ventured too close complained that their hearts stumbled in their chests, beating irregularly for days afterward. In 1924, a group of students from Chilean University visited the site while collecting folklore. Among their papers, now preserved in the Louisiana Historical Archive, is a typed note: stone arch discovered 6 feet below surface, air beneath warm, metallic, shallow vibration, constant, no insects, no birds within half-mile radius. One student, Ruth Atwell, disappeared that same week. Her companions assumed she'd returned home early, but her trunk was later found unopened in her dormitory, her letters half written, the final page reading, "It isn't dead, it waits for a name." During the 1930s, when the Federal Writers Project recorded oral histories from the region, several elderly residents spoke of the Calder woman. One, a man named Amos Givens, born 1856, son of a freed laborer, told the interviewer, "Mama said never go near that place. Said they made folks out of other folks. Said the white lady, she tried to make her husband live again, and she near did. But what come back wasn't him no more." He refused to elaborate. The transcript ends there. The land changed hands repeatedly through the mid-century, logging leases, failed farms, federal repossession, but no one stayed long. In 1962, the Corps of Engineers attempted to dredge part of the nearby river channel. When machinery struck stone, the foreman halted operations, noting old brick and metal fixtures. 2 men entered the exposed space with lanterns. Only one returned, incoherent, babbling about faces in the walls. The site was filled in within days and quietly omitted from official records. By 1975, the region was considered haunted ground. Locals called it Deadwater Parish. The Calder name appeared only in university dissertations and dusty archives. Yet in 1991, a sealed trunk surfaced in Baton Rouge, purchased from a descendant of the Lockhart family. Inside were ledgers in the same hand as Robert Calder's, preserved almost perfectly. Each entry catalogued experiments conducted between 1835 and 1859, viability of grafted tissue under direct current stimulation, retention of memory in divided organism, cross, lineage offspring, partial success, The ledgers were sent to Chilene's medical archive for restoration. 2 researchers involved later resigned, citing personal distress. One left a final note in the margin of the restoration log. The pages are warm to the touch. In 2011, soil analysis of the former Calder grounds revealed unidentified organic compounds consistent with decomposed cardiac tissue, yet none of it human. The chamber beneath remains sealed by federal order. Still, residents of Wilkinson County claim that on quiet nights, the air along the old boundary fence seems to beat in rhythm, faint and deliberate, as if the land itself remembers the pulse of its makers. And sometimes, when the humidity is right, a woman's voice can be heard calling through the reeds. Soft but clear, it divided. It still divides.